Quick background, I'm a graduate of South Burlington High School and the University of Vermont. I volunteered twice and served 2 tours as a combat medic with the 1st Infantry Division in Vietnam. I'm not a war hero, I'm a war survivor. What I saw, what I participated in, was the mass killing of human beings for no purpose. We killed over 6 million people in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, and in the end, we just left them to their fate. We've done pretty much the same thing in many other countries. War is not the answer. I'll now introduce my associate producer, Dave Ransom. Dave, you want to give us a little background?
Background? Where do you want me to start? I was just briefly in the Korean conflict, they call it. And the human animal just hasn't grown enough yet to be able to resolve that conflict, like it may be for you at home. Who knows? We hope we have some insights here today as how to get at it.
And today we have with us a special guest from an organization that I'm increasingly impressed with because they're very serious, well organized, not well funded, so send them money. I can't really solicit.
Send your money and diamonds.
This is a group of people that have come together, and I don't impress these. I'm very impressed with their results. The organization is Rights and Democracy. That's Rights and Democracy, and we have with us our guest, Elise Greaves. And if you'd like to tell us a little bit about your background, why you got involved with the organization, what your position in the organization is, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for having me on today. My name is Elise Greaves. I am a native Vermonter. I'm also a UVM graduate. I have worked with Rights and Democracy since it was founded in 2015, and we'll get more into the work that we do. But essentially, I got involved with Rights and Democracy because as I went through college and started to get a little bit more educated about a lot of the problems that are systemic, that are impacting our communities and the country, I knew that I wanted to do something that would work to change that. And I found Rights and Democracy in its first year, and I've been with the organization ever since.
Do you have a title within the organization?
Yes, I do. I'm the Political Engagement Coordinator.
And what exactly does being Political Engagement Coordinator entail from you?
Yeah, so Rights and Democracy has a couple of arms. One of them is that we work on progressive issues. We have a whole agenda, a multi-issue agenda around progressive policies and improving the lives of everyday Vermonters. And then we also support and endorse candidates for office at all levels who also, subscribe to the agenda and will be champions for that in the State House. So basically my role is to work with community members and make sure that those folks get elected into office. And so I'm literally, engaging people in the political process.
Now you also do some work in New Hampshire, I understand?
We do, yeah. We're a bi-state organization. So our New Hampshire chapter got started up a few months after the Vermont organization.
Now, what are the specific issues that your organization is addressing? I mean, I have a problem because first of all, it was racism. Then it was the Vietnam War. Then it was women's inequality. Racism is still a major thing.
Oh, boy.
Then it was lack of medical care. Then I finally got to this level of consciousness where it says, oh my God, everything's wrong. So I also came to realize that you can't work on fixing everything all at the same time. So how do you narrow down, and what are the other areas in addition to candidate selection and legislative input that your organization addresses?
Sure, yeah, so that's a big question. And there are, of course, a lot of real systemic problems, at community levels and state levels and nationwide. And so, I personally think that the way that we rise above that is, we're working against an agenda that has basically been been crafted and put on us through mass media, et cetera, for the past 5 decades. And so we have a lot of work to do to kind of, not only combat that, but also move forward and build a future in our own vision. And so, a lot of the things that we're working on include workers' rights. Most recently, we fought for a $15 an hour minimum wage for everyone in the state and paid family medical leave.
And even that's not really livable.
Exactly.
It's just a hell of a jump from from what's available now.
Either way, they were both vetoed by the governor, so we've got to pick that fight back up again. But we also work on environmental issues, a just transition to clean energy, clean water work. We work in partnership with a lot of other organizations who are doing great work across many issues in the state.
One of the things that really has troubled me, and it's not something I learned right away in the peace movement, but something that came out of a lot of book reading, a lot of study, and being fortunate enough to do some things at national level where I was able to meet with national level people from other organizations, famous authors, and political analysts that were like really bright people. And it's that freedom of the press kind of belongs to the people that own a press. I mean, like in Syracuse, New York, when I was the Vets Against the War chapter coordinator there, we had 2 competitive newspapers, the Herald Urinal and the Post Substandard, as we referred to them. There was a 2-story building. One paper was downstairs, the other paper was upstairs. One was the morning paper, one was the evening paper. I had a little tin printing press from when I was a kid. I actually could set type, little rubber type, and you could print stuff. So we took that down and we burned it in their plaza, which just upset so many of them. But also there were people up in the windows clapping. So there's not total loyalty. But people used to say, well, you guys do some awful jerky stuff to get media coverage. I said, yeah, because if we write something intelligent, articulate, critical, and correct, nobody's going to publish that. We've tried time and time again. So maybe we pour a lot of red dye in a fountain so it runs red with the blood of the people of Asia, or stuff like that. If it's the only way we can get the message out, and that's why we have demonstrations, because then the press is forced to acknowledge that there are people with a different point of view. And I think on a broad basis now, the public has sort of generally come to this change of consciousness where there's an increasing awareness that everything in government at every level has a price tag, and it's all bought and sold. Yeah. The rich get their way. You see people like Donald Trump. I mean, he didn't even pay people that did contract work for him. He got away with it. Don't ask me how. But I didn't see him having my back when I was fighting in Vietnam. And I didn't see most of these other famous politicians. They were special. They were saving themselves for some God-provided mission to help America. Here's President Trump, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. He got out of the service by claiming he had bone spurs in his feet. I had flat feet, and they said, you really want to go? And I said, please, please, let me in. I want to serve my country. The rich people do not send their kids. They send your kids. Especially if you're working class, don't have a doctor that's a family friend, and don't have money to make contributions to campaigns. They will send your kid, and if he goes to war, you don't expect him to come back. Not the same sweet, innocent child man that you waved goodbye to. We come back changed. We are not the same, and we never will be again. We don't come home from the war comes home with us. All these legislative things ultimately are bought and paid for unless there is so much mass discontent that it forces them to change. And that is what the so-called left/progressive/enlightened organizations do. We push the scale. We try to force them to accept the public will. But, I mean, we spend more money on the military than the entire rest of the world's militaries combined. Far more than China, and a hell of a lot more than Russia, and the European Union, Africa, right down to Uruguay, Paraguay, Latvia, Lithuania. Everybody's military is only a fraction of what the United States of America spends on a military. And we're the safest country in the world. Who can attack us? Nobody can bring a whole army across the Atlantic or Pacific Ocean. Nobody's going to come down from Canada up from Mexico. We're safe. We're basically unattackable except for thermonuclear weapons. God help the world, because that's the end of it. So it's not that we don't have enough money to provide a living wage, to provide health care, to send our kids to school. Almost all the European countries, if the kids qualify for college or trade school, they get sent, because their governments are smart enough to know that the more education a person has, the less likely they are to get involved in criminal activity, the more productive they'll be, the higher their tax rate will be. So they will bring more money into the government ultimately than the government spent on their education. I have a very dear friend from Iraq. Her government sent her to America to get educated. Another family member of hers was sent right through the PhD level at the London School of Economics. Didn't pay a dime. Apartment paid for, food paid for, a little money to go have a little fun with. And this is not such a rich country. America has the money to solve its problems. The problem is that the people that control the money are so greedy, they will not let you have access to it. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you for bringing that up, because
that's sort of my global perspective.
Well, it translates very well into
Yep.
what's happening even right here in Vermont. You know, I think one of the core mission of Rights and Democracy is to build independent political power that will allow our communities, to have a say in the decisions that are being made for and about them in city halls and townhouses and, town halls and the State House. And so it's really important that we are organizing and building the political will in the State House, at the same time, to really bring those issues to light and to, ultimately get them passed, because it is an issue of priorities. If we were really listening to our communities and what they need, and what would, benefit, millions of people across the country, then, we would have things like livable wages and universal health care and, paid family leave,
education,
clean water, free education, all of these great things that, to some people seem very radical, but in reality,
even some third world
Yeah.
countries even have these things.
yeah, and in reality, it's just about raising the standards and the quality of life for people, and making sure that we're building happy and healthy communities.
That's something that always amazes me. How much money do you need to be happy? Mm-hmm. Of course, I would like to be vexed with the decision of whether I will buy the newest Lamborghini or the newest Ferrari, or would I be happier with something smaller like an Alfa Griffith?
And I think most people would just be happy to be able to pay all of their bills on time and
Yeah.
have some money left over to afford to buy food. It's it does seem like there's this narrative of people will just spend extravagantly if they're given a leg up or given a little more, and really what we're talking about is just making sure that people can meet their basic needs, which is not the case right now.
Yeah, I mean, somebody's got like tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars, or they're even a billionaire. How much do you actually need to be happy? I don't have all that much, but I have in my case, a little bit of a unique, it's like a really antique house. And I get to go places, I get to do things, I get to eat reasonably well, not on a small fortune, but compared to a lot of people in Vermont, I'm like, well off. But compared to the professional class, not so well off. And compared to the rich, I'm a joke. So what do they get for all this money? Bragging rights? I mean, I have no problem with someone who is gifted by God, graced by good luck, and blessed by the ability to work hard and creatively to create something, hopefully something that benefits society, not a new kind of bomb. And they get not rich like Trump and some of these others. They get well off. They get how many bedrooms do you need? Well, how many kids? There's people. I love the televangelists. He wants a $30 million airplane to go along with his 30-bedroom house. Hey, how many kids you got? 30? Oh, you're not admitting to the no. But how big a house do you need? Is there even a place in modern contemporary society for these huge mansions and gigantic estates? Or does that really belong back in the era of the robber barons, and maybe these places should be turned into homes for aging veterans who don't have much money because there was never much opportunity or acceptance of them? Veterans are considered to be a little bit tainted by their experience, their immersion in death in many cases. How much do you need? Gigantic yacht? Or with just a nice boat like you see putting around Lake Champlain for the most part? There's some big exceptions, but how much do you need? And it just amazes me that the United States of America has been given its revolutionary history, resistance against the British, all the stunts like the Boston Tea Party and worse. And you got a relatively, somewhere between, I don't think it's 1%, I think it's more like 3 to 5%, but not any bigger than that. Certainly you have a very couple percent, and their wealth is more than that of everybody else all put together.
Yep.
And they want to maintain that, for generations yet unborn, at the same time that their profit making is destroying the very environment that will sustain life. I mean, these people are crazy. Greed is a sickness, and it's behind the bad economics that we're suffering under, that are not allowing people to just have a nice life. The money is there for everyone to have, not a rich life, not a superfluous, fluffy, feel-good, perfect life, but a good life. Yeah, it's there. Minimum wage. Yeah, we can do better. We can do better with the health care, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And
you're agreeing, Elise, huh?
I am. Yes. Yeah, I agree.
I think the point now is I'm almost wondering if we've gone past the need for legislatures, that maybe we could think about the possibility, at least on issues like war, sending our kids to get killed someplace or to kill other people's kids.
Crazy.
In the computer age, maybe some of this should be done by plebiscite. The ancient Greeks that gave us democracy, demios, everybody kind of voted on stuff. They had leaders, they had great orators, and they would get up and argue on one side, and another would argue the other side, and then everybody would vote. Maybe we need to be considering that as a possibility.
They still had war. It was until the Greek women, the story of Lysistrata, said, kick you out of bed unless you get home from war. That's the war stopped. And today, here's an Elise.
Yeah, well, then they want to go to war even more to rape all the other guys' women. So.
Feminist revolution. The stars are coming up for the women, and that's what I like to see.
Thanks, Dave.
We need more women candidates, Elise. You got any?
We need more women involved in all levels of.
Well, you look at the history of women, like Boudica in Britain fighting the Romans. There are great women warriors. there was a group of liberation fighters called the Black Widows
But they're not always
in
feminine.
Vietnam. And to be a Black Widow fighter,
Yep.
you had to be a woman sole survivor of your entire family. These women were the terror. They were fearless because they just didn't. They didn't give a damn if they lived or died. But by God, they wanted to kill Americans,
Sure.
and they could fight. So women can do these things.
But it's not women that take over the masculine. It's
Yeah, let me
women
finish-
who
let me
are the
finish.
feminine.
So as a generalization, men are high on aggression. They're built
Yeah.
a little more powerfully.
Yeah, they go by the
We want,
generalizations,
we
yeah.
take, and we don't like to clean up our room. Now,
Like to
women-
mess it up, you mean?
women, on the other hand, and again, these are gross generalizations,
Yes, they are.
but where men are high on acquisitiveness and aggression and being clever, women also on clever. Women are more on the nurturance side.
Yeah.
They want to maintain the home. They want to maintain the relations with the other families. They want to see their kids grow safely and survive and prosper to the degree that is possible for them. So
You're piquing
This-
my interest here.
Yeah.
this may have
Yeah.
this may have served a purpose in the early evolution of mankind, but it's too dangerous now. We need absolute, unblemished parity for women at every level and every capability and capacity of society. And how dare somebody pay a woman less because she's got some physical differences?
Yeah.
How does that allow you to pay her less than a guy doing the same work? It doesn't even make sense.
Slavery mentality.
Are you doing specific stuff around women's issues per se? I mean, you can't take on everything.
Right, and I think the way that we approach our work in a lot of ways is like all of these issues impact different folks differently, right? Like the $15 an hour minimum wage. will
But these are
impact
two guys
women
talking to you,
differently.
you know.
I know. And I think
I'm gender neutral. I can use any bathroom,
yeah.
so we're balanced.
Now in Vermont, you can use any singles
Yeah.
bathroom,
Any
regardless of gender.
Does this strike a chord? Are you working on that in that area?
That was something that we were a part of, but we weren't, like leading the charge on that. There are some great groups that
So-
were. But, I think in terms of, I guess what I'm trying to say about the idea of women's issues and women's rights is like, I believe that livable wages, family medical leave, universal health care, I mean, these are all things that are women's rights. We saw a couple years ago, in 2017, after the Trump election, the Women's March, which, was one of the biggest global days of action
It was great.
in history here in Vermont. I was
It was
the
great.
organizer of the one in Montpelier, which was the biggest rally that Vermont's ever seen.
I was shocked because up till then, one that several of us organized when President Nixon pardoned Ford,
Yep.
Yeah.
which was held primarily at the University of Vermont. That had been the biggest one up to that point. And then I looked at Montpelier and I said, what we did at UVM was a joke. I mean, this is
Yeah.
this is like huge.
Fantastic.
Huge
Yeah.
is an inadequate word. Gargantuan, gigantic.
I think, folks were feeling, it was right after Trump's election. I think folks were feeling a lot of fear and anger and needed something to plug their energy into that was going to be hopeful. And I think it, it was a beautiful day.
It
And you
was the
talked about-
attitude. It was the
Yeah.
attitude of that day. Many crowd gatherings you go to did not have the clearly expressed decency that was all through the fields, all through the lawns, all through the streets.
Mm-hmm.
There was that feminine caring that was there with everyone.
We are here to make it clear to you politicians that we are just not going to put up with this anymore. There's a lot of us. we vote, and you better get your act together, because what you see here today is going to be multiplied many times when it comes time to vote. We're watching you. You are warned.
Do you want to talk about
my
the
impression of that rally.
Do you want to talk about the F-35?
Well, that's another, here's the Air Guard protecting us from what? The Russians don't fly backfire bombers to our fail-safe line. We don't fly B-52s and the new super-duper bombers. We don't fly right to the edge of their airspace and come back and all wave at each other on the way. Nobody does that stuff. So the F-35, they talk about as a fighter. The guy, Speary, who shepherded and oversaw the entire development of the F-16, which is what they fly now, he said it's a dog. It's not a good airplane. Acknowledged that there are the newest generation of both MiGs and Sukhois.
Yeah.
We have companies, the Russians have bureaus. The MiG Bureau, Sukhoi Bureau, they each have a fighter that's a better fighter than that one. It can do things that he said the best thing that a F-35 pilot can do in a dogfight is to punch out, just to get out of the airplane. And if you look at the actual advertisements within the military community, they define it this way, not as a fighter plane. It is a low-level, stealth-capable, deep penetration, ground-hugging, first-strike bomber. It's designed to go in low, fast, beneath the radar, and then just bomb the heck out of stuff. You think of fighter planes, you think of these little rickety wood and steel things they flew in World War I or something. These fighter planes, they're just about as big as the big bombers of World War II. These big airplanes, they carry a lot of bombs. And where are they going to go drop these bombs? Out little third world countries. It reminds me of when Mussolini and the Italian fascists attacked Ethiopia, because it was the only place. And there's actual films of Mussolini's fascist airplanes attacking villages in Ethiopia. And the Ethiopians are out there throwing spears at them because they don't have anything else. So we're sending the most sophisticated bombers just to drop the bombs on people that don't really even have anything to steal except their natural resources.
All right.
And what's it going to do? All the scientists, all the doctors have weighed in. Yeah, it's a lot louder than the F-16, which will stop any conversation here until they go by. It's going to hurt kids' hearing. It is going to impair children's cognitive abilities. Elderly people, it's going to raise blood pressure, that shock coming through.
Yeah.
It can precipitate heart attacks. They're going to screw up children's lives, possibly kill some elderly people. Property values, that thing people hold for their retirement. The property values in Winooski and some other areas, when that plane gets here, it will be required. When you sell your house in their listing, you will notify that your home is in an area that the government has deemed the EPA has deemed unfit for human habitation. How do you think that's going to affect your property value? So we're all like, save the Guard, bring the F-35. To do what? They're going to attack us. They're going to blow the hell out of our housing value, and they're going to hurt our kids and elderly. Yeah, I'd rather they didn't have a mission than attack us. And I'm really not very excited about having them go over and attack people in other countries. I think it's time to come home and heal ourselves and reallocate our money to raise those wages, get these people the medical care they need, the education they need, the decent home that they need, and to teach the heck out of birth control, whether they like it or not, because there's too damn many people.
But hey, my dad was a realtor, he'd be happy.
I don't have a PhD in economics, but I got it all figured out. People into resources equals wealth. Diminishing resources, rising populations.
Poverty.
Not a good formula for the general prosperity.
No. But how do you fit into this?
I was going to say, so what do we do about this, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of problems that, as we've outlined. And so rights and democracy, what we call our theory of change, is that, we need, like I said, two things, an electoral strategy, and then we also need people who are organizing in their own communities, talking to their neighbors and friends about these issues and, how we're going to go about creating change. Which does not happen overnight. So, there's like no sweeping single answer to any of these very complex problems. But, a core problem is that people aren't engaged in their democracy. They feel disempowered and disengaged from the decisions that are being made about their lives. And we, as people, have the power to actually come together and have a big influence on those decisions, but we don't know that. And so Rights and Democracy believes that when people come together, our motto is together we win, that we are able to, build that power and build a voice for the agenda and the issues that we want and the Vermont that we want to see.
There's another problem I've become aware of, and I'm shocked that I wasn't aware of this far earlier in my trail of activism, my timeline, is the fact that on one hand, a lot of people say, well, the average people are just so stupid. Well,
Yeah.
how many people have the luxury, that some of us do, to read, not just watch TV, to read a lot, to meet really intelligent people who have studied and really know these things?
Yeah.
If you're two people working substandard wages, maybe you're each working 2, even 3 jobs. There's families where
Oh, yeah.
the 2 breadwinners have half a dozen jobs between them. And there's hunger in Vermont.
Yep.
Their kids and their parents, they go to bed hungry. Think this only happens in Africa or other third world? There are people in the United States, there are people in Vermont who go to bed hungry, and when wintertime, they go to bed cold. They can't afford to keep the house as warm as they'd like. And forget having weatherization. They really can't afford that.
Yeah.
So how do you expect these people to say, okay, now it's time for me to become sophisticated with my politicians. I think I'll just sit down and read a book on it. And we
No.
haven't given them an education either.
No.
So you have a huge segment of this population that's really not prepared, not well prepared to deal with sophisticated political issues, which is another need for a group like Rights for Democracy, is to be able to explain things in simple terms and point at people and say, no, it's you that we're working for. It's you that need to write the letter, however bad the English grammar, to get out in the streets no matter how busy, whatever. And once in a while, you need to do something because it's all about you. It's all about, ultimately, the first people we're trying to bootstrap are the people who are in the worst position to help themselves, because the mere act of surviving economically in Vermont and other areas prohibits the time and the ability to get good information and to go confront with that information.
Yep, that is correct. Yeah, people are not stupid. People have been, taught for decades that, their voice doesn't matter. I mean, the influence of money in politics, as we talked about today, I think is like another, people see voting as kind of pointless because it's all corrupt anyway.
And now even the upper class is letting it all get out that it's all controlled, which is another way of saying, don't bother yourselves.
Right. That is where organizations like Rights and Democracy come in. to really, get out there into communities and actually talk to people. One thing that we've kicked off in the past couple of weeks and that we'll be working on this summer is a community listening project, which means that we're going statewide. Our volunteers are going to be working statewide to actually go out and knock doors in communities, whether, like all over the state, rural areas, and really talk to people about the issues that matter to them and, why they think these issues exist, so that we can really say we do have the backs of Vermonters and we do have Vermonters' best interests, after we go out and collect thousands of these surveys statewide. That will really inform, the things that we work on moving forward, and really inform what we want to essentially, hear from candidates for elected office.
I have a question there. Do
Yeah.
the people that you meet actually know the issues exist?
Like the interesting thing is like they live the issues, right? I mean,
They live the issues.
They
They
are
are the
experts
issues.
on the issues because they live the issues. And so I know, for me personally, growing up in, a pretty low income family, I never realized that was something that that millions of people struggle with until somebody pointed that out to me. And I think a lot of times, we live in a society where, it's the individual's fault. This idea of like pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And so people take it on themselves when maybe they, can't pay their rent or buy food. And so I think that when you're talking to someone and you're actually saying, this is a problem that is felt by, not only tens of thousands of Vermonters, but millions of people across the country. It's not just you and, you and your neighbor and, we are the people who are going to actually come together and change things.
And you can't really be considered or consider yourself a failure when you've never had an opportunity.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, you're looking at two former military guys who didn't realize what we were doing when we took the pledge and joined the military. What?
Yeah.
Well, I stuck him. I pledged to defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
And domestic.
Well, I found out that my foreign enemies, those gentle persons of the other persuasion that we derogatorily called the VCAM, actually the proper name was the National Liberation Front, and their allies and the government of the People's Republic of North Vietnam, our friends in the end. So having found out that my enemies weren't my enemies, and I don't go looking for enemies, but what I did find out was my own government was my enemy.
Yeah.
Put me in that, and my friends in that position. I lost friends. I mean, it's
Do you find that, at least, too, that consciousness of, everything's fine and the problem's out there? And
I think there's a sea change in consciousness. I think people are starting to wake up. I think people
do
like
see that.
her are leading that, are leading that charge. I mean, we're a couple of old guys,
yeah.
and 72, our time's coming. We got friends dying all around us. We're on our way out. We're yesterday's news. We're trying to stay busy.
Yeah.
But the new generation of activists, in many ways, they get it better than we do because they're living it, looking to the rest of their lives from where they are at a place where we long to go once were.
Yeah.
And
But
Can you respond to that?
yeah, I mean, I do hear that a lot.
I'm self-checking on some of my perspectives with you.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, I do hear that a lot. That Vermont is already like such a progressive place, and there are no problems here. And, that is, I mean, I understand, I guess, why people can have that perspective, but it's actually not the case.
No.
Yeah, I don't look at Vermont and I say, what, were the progressive leaders of the whole country's in trouble then? We're not so.
We do have a lot of great progressive champions and leaders in Vermont.
But as
I
a
just think we need more
totality,
of
we
them.
don't live up to our. As a totality,
Yes.
I don't think we live up to our hype.
Yeah. I would agree. And I also agree that, the youth and the millennials right now. I mean, basically, I grew up my dad was a veteran. He was deployed to Iraq when I was 14. And so, we've basically grown up in this war culture, post 9/11, and now, we're living in the age of Trump. And there's been so much going on in our lives, and climate change, that started to come into consciousness a lot more in the past 20 years or so. And so it's no surprise to me that our young people are getting activated and jumping into, wanting to create change and organizing.
There's been a long period where us old fogies have been like looking back behind us and like, hey,
Come on.
yeah, come on,
Yeah.
follow me. Where it's the old army thing. Follow me.
Yeah.
Where are our replacements? And now I think we're starting to see them come because, frankly, we've had a couple of deadbeat me generations, and I'm feeling a little more hopeful now with not just Rights and Democracy, but other groups that are forming, have been formed. An emphasis on things that were always kind of like not paid, like the environment, that we're just kind of like, oh yeah, we're for the environment, we got a green flag.
Yep.
And on to, the issues they were really interested in. Now I think it's becoming a crisis. I mean, for me, the environment's even more important than the war thing, short of going thermonuclear, which will be the ultimate environmental.
Well, what Mark Hughes has just been performing, I guess if the legislature wakes up, they'll override the governor's veto of, was it S-281 or something like that? Yeah. And they, I mean, to think that in Vermont, where we just started talking about removing slavery from the Constitution, as I guess we're the only state, along with Alabama, that has it in their Constitution. And here are these issues on the burner. And I get an email like on that one, on changing the Constitution. Oh, we're all for it. We just don't have time in this session to deal with it. So, please be patient. It'll come up in the next session. Then we can take, because it is a constitutional issue. We want to get it right. And here's Mark that's got this. I was talking with a state policeman the other day, and I quizzed him particularly about. He was a great guy. He was getting lunch, and we were waiting to get away from. That was down in Vergennes, and I asked him about the if there was anything really going on with each state police person learning what their natural biases really are, so you don't have to act on them. Oh, well, I prefer black, you prefer yellow, okay, I prefer red. And if you know that, then you don't have to jump after or shoot down somebody who's not what you prefer. And he said, that program's going so well with the state police. And I was so encouraged to hear that.
That's great.
They have somebody in charge, and so I was thinking, hey, Mark, there's one up for you.
Yeah.
And now they're trying to get it through so the governor does not have the authority to kick out whoever's disturbing his government if they rub people the wrong way while they're discovering their racial biases. The governor wants to hang on to that power.
Yeah, which we all need to do.
Yeah.
On an individual.
So how do we kick the butts a little bit and get things like that done?
Yeah, I mean, it comes to putting a lot of pressure on the governor and putting pressure on decision makers.
But who's awake to do that?
You have to go to them.
Have to go.
That's the thing. I mean, that's why we organize, is to wake people up and get them to take action.
So this is a wake-up organization.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
This is
I mean, we're
reveille.
helping to wake people up, I guess, in a lot of ways, literally by, going to their doors and having conversations with them, but also,
You get any slammed in your face?
People are usually super nice with their refusals on the doors in Vermont, so I really appreciate that.
Do you pick and choose, or just go everywhere?
Go everywhere.
Go everywhere?
Yep.
So you're ready.
Yes.
Do you have backup?
Yes, we go out as a team.
You can call on David.
Yeah.
So
Come out
what?
canvassing with me sometime.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
why not?
What are you finding? What's
I used to sell insurance, little,
You told me that, yeah.
Yeah, door
So
to
you're
door.
Door to
salesman,
door.
So you're
I'm not
ready to
afraid,
go.
I'm not afraid to knock on a door.
I sold magazines.
You'd be good too.
What are you finding as you do this?
So,
where-
we ask people a series of questions, what are the issues in your community that,
Mm-hmm.
are important to you or that you see are issues in the community? And
Oh.
it's things like good paying jobs,
Yeah.
affordable and accessible health care, the opioid crisis, young
Yeah.
people leaving Vermont,
Yeah.
like all of these issues that we're working on, clean water and clean energy.
Yeah.
And we're finding, overwhelmingly that people do, care about all of these issues or like see
Huh.
them in some way impacting their communities, which is no surprise.
That's encouraging.
Yes, it's encouraging in that people are, chatting with us about the things that are impacting their lives. It's also like, whew, we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
But I think when people, like I said, really start to hear that these are things that are not specific to them, this is like a lot of systemic issues and
Well, one issue Louise and I have lived through is the one we just had tossed on us recently, the education.
yeah.
Oh, we don't have as many children, so we got to cut the budget, and you got to do this, and you got to do that. This is the State Board of Education. And people are going around saying, these beautiful people who are on the State Board of Education, highly educated,
Yep.
very capable of doing many things, we're holding a gun to our heads. And I said, how did they get that idea? Well, it's because the state isn't doing what you're doing. Now, the representatives should be, whether they got lazy or what, I don't know.
You mean communicating with the people who are actually doing the work in the schools?
Yeah. And I asked one superintendent, I says, I got this idea that if the State Board of Education, bright people, very wonderful, likable people, if they could come up with a curriculum that could be from kindergarten right through college and say, family members of the state of Vermont, we have a problem. How would you solve it? Now that's what you're doing. You're saying, do you have any, what are the problems and what is it about them you'd like to see change? Well, if
Yeah,
they'd done
absolutely.
that, they wouldn't have little kids running off in tears and angry. Why, just in our little town of Waterville, people were so angry, I thought they were going to have a fit.
Yep.
Yeah, you can't offer a solution
Unless
to
you-
someone that doesn't see a problem.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's also important that the people who are most impacted by the decisions that are being made have a say.
So what are you
In the
finding in
solution.
this inquiry? And
Yeah. Right. And good public schools is another question.
yeah, it's
that we
oh,
ask
it's another
people,
one of your
and
hot
people are always like, of course.
Of course.
Like, of course this is an important issue.
Yeah.
People care deeply about all of these things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And are you finding any solutions?
So that's our job, I think, as people who are going in the doors, like to offer a solution. Call your representative. Do you want to talk to your neighbors about this, and maybe talk to them about how they are viewing these issues as well, or what they think is important. Talking to them about maybe where these problems are coming from. And right.
So you're
How do we go about
encouraging
solutions?
communication with like the state representatives and so on?
Yep. So that was, that was a big thing when S40, which was the bill to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, pay family medical leave insurance. We did a big, outreach push so that folks in their communities, first of all, knew that this was an issue, because again, you can't take action unless there's a moment to take action. And so it was that educating and alerting folks, and then driving calls to legislators and the governor.
Not my favorite tactic, but particularly when you have a politician who is really swimming the wrong way in the current. especially when it comes to that thing they all fear, election time.
Yep.
And they have town meetings and public speaking and this and that. You just send a lot of people, and you do not let up on them.
Exactly.
You focus on the key things, and it's okay to scream at them, especially if they said one thing last time around and then they did the opposite. Just get in their face. They are no more important than you are. In fact, they are less important than you are because they are your servants. Sorry, in a democracy, it's a privilege to serve, not at all license to exploit or rip people off.
Is David on your staff now?
Well, also, yeah.
I'm on everybody's staff.
You're on everybody.
Nobody pays me. And just as much, nobody pays much
That's
attention
what
to
we're
me.
all about, Louise.
But the thing is, when these people come out in public and start asking for votes,
Yeah.
you have every right not to swear and be a total jerk about it, but you have every right to be in your face and to call them out. And as soon as they get done with you, the next person gets up, calls them out on exactly the same thing
Yep.
until they pledge change.
If they know about it.
Or,
If
right,
they know
I
about
think
it.
another, a key piece of Rights and Democracy's work is running candidates for office. So I think another thing is, if they are swimming the wrong way, as you say, then you run someone against them,
Yeah.
Like, you can't just let them have a free ride.
Have an
back
open,
to
have an open
Yeah.
their
pasture.
position. Right, you gotta
Boy,
fight back.
that's tough. How do you find the people that?
There are so many amazing people in our communities who have,
Underpaid, I mean, not the
Yeah.
hierarchy that David was referring to earlier.
yeah, but you
Poor
mean
little
in
rich
terms of,
boys. I mean, people who really
Yeah.
know their stuff and have the compassion and are able to
Mm-hmm.
spend the time and have the knowledge to
Yep.
compete.
people who are good on the issues.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean that's what we're looking for is like I said, to build more progressive champions up at all levels. So yeah, how do you find those people? I mean, we have as an organization a leadership ladder so that people come into the organization, they join a regional team or an issue team, and then
We might be interested in having some issue teams present on this show.
yeah, yep.
Yeah.
And then, after a while, we want to be supporting and endorsing those folks to actually run for office because we have a lot of wonderful members all over the state. And several of them actually are running this cycle, which is very exciting.
Now, were you part of that group down at the women's march that had all the ladies stand up who are running for public office? Is that part of your?
Yeah, so I think you're talking about the women's convention that took place in Detroit. In
And there was a
October.
group right here in Montpelier on the steps. We are all
I was
women
not a
and
part
we're
of
running
that,
for
but
office.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that part of your work?
So, I mean, that's pretty explicitly. I mean, there are organizations like Emerge Vermont, for example, that
Oh, Emerge.
focuses
Okay.
specifically on women running for office, which is awesome. They have a training program. So Rights and Democracy also has a training program, but we're not, specifically focused on, women running for office, for
So
example.
you probably collaborate a lot with other nonprofits.
Yes. Yep.
Can you
We do.
elucidate that a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So I'll talk specifically about our electoral trainings, but we have a team called Lead Vermont that has done trainings, and we did one in Lyndonville earlier this year, in Rutland, in St. Albans. So we're also trying to, hit kind of relatively conservative areas in the state where we might want to seek out potential candidates. But we work with the NEA, the Vermont NEA, ACLU, VCV, which is Vermont Conservation Voters, Planned Parenthood of Northern New England, and Rights and Democracy, of course, to put on those trainings. So yes, it's very important, especially when we talk about having a multi-issue platform, that we are working with other organizations that are doing good work as well
Do you
across
ever
a
get
number
into
of
the
issues.
issues of war and peace itself, veterans and people who just haven't realized, like us going
Yeah.
into the service, good Boy Scouts doing our duty for God and country, and trying to wake people up in that regard?
I mean, truthfully, we haven't. And that's why,
That's why you're going to hire David, right?
Exactly, yeah, that's why it's important that we're building relationships with y'all, because that's,
Yeah.
you're the organization that does that and raises
Right.
awareness about
we
that.
have people that'll go anywhere and speak. I mean, I
Yeah,
will-
that's great.
I will, especially when you talk about things like why don't we have the money? Why are we because I will talk about military budget. I will talk about what we're involved in that spends this money. I mean,
Yep.
what better business than to make a lot of bombs and tanks and rifles and destroy them so that you have to replace them? And some of this stuff, I mean, they got $1 million bombs. Some of this stuff is so incredibly high-tech precision and so expensive, and unfortunately, it's getting to be about the only thing made in America. Look at the labels and the stamps on just about anything you buy. It's all made in China. I had this fantasy, World War III,
Yeah.
and it's China versus the United States. But the problem is, the United States has now bought all its military equipment from China, and they won't give us any spare parts. So we
What a
just
terror.
run up the white flag. I mean, we make and sell military armaments and equipment all over the world. It is one of the huge industries.
Yes.
Darn near everything else.
It's got us by the neck.
It's American brand. Maybe it's assembled here, but the motors from Korea, the bodies from Japan, the transmissions from Brazil. I mean, there's not very much that we actually manufacture anymore. And the irony is that historically, Britain, Germany, France, and America, they were the manufacturing companies, and also Czechoslovakia. They were the ones that made the high quality, long lasting, precision everything. Milling machines, the machines that make the machines. The really high tech stuff. We don't do that anymore. That stuff's all coming from China. It's all coming from Vietnam. It's all coming from Bangladesh. The rich, in their drive to be even greedier and get richer, they basically send all your jobs to other countries where the people will work for a fraction of what we pay. We've done this to ourselves. We've allowed it to be done to us, however
Right.
we want it.
Right.
That's it.
And, we don't talk about these issues explicitly, so thank you for talking about these issues.
Well, I came across a saying that's apt for all this stuff too. I've been thinking for decades and decades. I get very frustrated when people talk about time is money, and you hear workers, people who are in a plant of some kind, Caterpillar, what have you, and they talk about, the boss is always telling us, time is money. I got to get back to work. And people on the street and all the rest. So I looked it up a little bit and I said, oh my gosh. Ben Franklin is the one who misappropriated this saying, time is money, from the Greek. And you know what the Greek says? Like our spending time here today. Time is precious. Well, he wasn't stupid Ben, but by golly, he got it wrong on that one, David.
Here's a great philosophical thought.
Yeah.
Your death begins at the moment of your conception. Think about that.
I love it.
You have a certain unknown amount of time
Yep.
in which to have all the sex, drugs, rock and roll, but also to be able to change the world. You either are just going to pass through this life and be irrelevant, you're living and made no difference at all, or
Contact Elise today.
exactly, or you hurt the world. You came, you took, you didn't give squat, and you left it in worse shape than you came into it.
Yeah.
Or what some of us are trying to do, whether we believe in karma or God or a particular faith, or just believe in life itself. We want to leave the world in better shape than the way it was when we came into it.
Yeah.
Less pain, less harm, cleaner, neater, tidier, and better organized. That's why we're here. So I would highly recommend Rights and Democracy as an organization worthy of
Yeah.
looking into. And they're just people like us, like you. All, don't be shy.
We love to have
Just-
you come visit our chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Y'all should come visit us
Because
too.
you'll see a whole bunch of people like this. Can you stand it?
That's great. No,
So anyway,
I've had a
we're-
lot of fun. That would be fun.
We're about out of time.
All right.
We really appreciated having you
Yeah.
on the show. We
Thank
will
you for having me on.
hopefully have you back maybe in a few months, or Shay Totten and one of your other
Yep.
members.
Great team.
Again, I have personally been greatly impressed by this organization and what it is doing and the way that it works. And if you're not politically involved, this would be a good place to start and perhaps a good place to stay. They are doing real work, and it is an opportunity to make a difference. There is no excuse. We're still the richest country in the world. No excuse for child hunger. No excuse for families not to be heated, to have education, to have medical care. The money's here. We have it. We need to fix our system. It's broken. It's no longer a democracy. It's been hijacked by the very rich and the corporations and bankers that run it. So let's
They're
get going and
oblivious.
change our country.
Thanks, David.